Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. And this week, we're nearing Halloween, so I felt, why not? I completed this game on my channel ways back, so I also have a playthrough of it, but it's also very pertinent because this game is part of a franchise that now has the Netflix series that is in full swing. The next season of which will actually involve characters from this game. Of course, Alucard already was in there, but technically he was in 3. But Richter and Maria, for sure, from Rondo of Blood, will be in this one. But anyway, yes, we are talking about Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And as a precursor to things, I will say that Castlevania is one of my favorite franchises to a point. And that point being that, honestly, the originals, the platformer style, was not my thing. The first 4, 5, 6 games, up into Dracula X and Rondo of Blood, not really my style of game. I'd played stuff like Sonic, Mega Man, and the like. Donkey Kong Country and the like, but I wasn't really a platformer guy, so I've seen Castlevania a lot, thanks to speedrunners and achievement hunters and things like that, and I've watched some footage of it. My introduction to Castlevania was this game, and I don't know why it was. I don't know what it was that possessed me. My guess was I was in Blockbuster way back, because, yeah, you remember those. You hear about a game maybe, or you play a game, because this is 1997. I'm 12 years old, so right in that preteen teenage year thing, and I'm probably heard it from like a Nintendo Power or some kid at school, and I brought it home, and I might even still have the disc. I doubt I still have the disc, but it would be pretty funny if I did. But obviously it's been re-released. There, I got it out on PS4, and that was with Rondo of Blood as well. So, there is easy access for Castlevania Symphony of the Night, especially nowadays, but for a long time, the PS1 version was kind of all there was, until a PSP version around 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, and I have played both. Really, the only real difference between the Castlevania versions that you got on the PS1 and the PSP were the voice acting. And I will spend some time talking about that because I have an opinion, which is never good, but hey, I'll get to that when I get to that. I'm sure, because people think I'm going to crap all over it. I'm not. I'm going to say pros and cons of both, and my side as to why I think certain things are the way they are. Anyway, we've got more than just the voice acting to talk about. We've got what this game means then and now. What it basically did to transform the franchise. And that will be kind of a way to discuss how, when I do sequels or when I do plots for other games, like I've done Final Fantasy, I've done Ys, I've done Castlevania now, I've done Tales. What I'm going to do going forward is I'm going to do game by game by game, sometimes maybe in a row. But for the sake of disclosure, if it does ever seem like I'm overusing a game or a game franchise, it's simply because I want to give every single game their due. That's to do with certain games having like specific stages or specific bosses in the sense of Mega Man. Like, you can't talk Mega Man without talking about stages, right? So that might take its own time. I originally wanted to do maybe 1 to 2 games in a condensed format, but I don't know how long that's going to take, so I'm going to use this as its own thing and say, well, Symphony of the Night is big enough on its own to deserve a podcast, and it's, well, obviously the most popular one, outside of maybe 4 or the original, but again, it also says that I'm like not going to overexert one subject, I'm not going to pass over some subject, and I'm not going to miss anything. These podcasts are mainly my general thoughts, but the games I know the most about, I can dig deeper, and that's where you get the longer hour-long podcasts and things. We'll see how this goes, and for all those platformers in those old days, or even newer games of some franchises and whatnot, that's how it's going to work. If I overuse a series, I overuse a series. I'm going to try and space it out so I don't. But that's just a warning if people get sick of like Final Fantasy or Tales or Castlevania or whatever. It's pretty much at my whim, pretty much. But getting back to Symphony of the Night, when this game came out, it did a lot of things that changed the franchise. It became what was known as a Metroidvania. So Metroid, Super Metroid, for instance, was the main one. And then this game really set the tone for exploration and backtracking. They've been trying to call it like action, exploration, platformer, something, some such, as some blanket term. You know how they used to call things like Doom clones and Dark Souls likes and shit like that. It's Metroidvania. Everybody kind of knows the vibe of what you're going, whether you do more of the Castlevania side or you do the more Metroid side. Castlevania, to me, tends to be more of a mode. Like, Metroid tends to be sort of a mode. Like, Metroid would be more like an Aliens or a horror movie. Castlevania is that gothic horror, that B-movie schlock horror kind of thing with mythology tacked onto it. You don't have to be a Metroidvania, but the same thing is, it's an easier thing to say than action, space exploration, whatever. So we just go over the blanket term of Metroidvania. Castlevania, at the time, kind of stopped doing the platformer thing because Koji Igarashi decided to change it up. So he would develop things like Aria of Sorrow, Circle of the Moon, Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin. Those games that I really dove into because Symphony of the Night had set the groundwork for those. And those were like on the portable side. Thankfully, a lot of them are getting re-released now on PS4 and PS5, and it's really nice. But you had stuff like Castlevania 64, which I've heard is bad. Never played it, so I don't know. But I played the PS2 games, Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness, and I will cover those as well. I might actually have to put them on my list if I forget. Those were kind of tuned to the action games at the time, like a Devil May Cry or a Bayonetta kind of thing. So they didn't have the platforming either. So again, I'm not a huge platformer guy, and especially as I get older, I'm more like tentative and cautious, and I don't like the death pit thing. I don't like the precise jumping. That's just a personal preference. I come from an RPG background more so these days. Symphony of the Night definitely took a lot of RPG inspiration. So stats, leveling up, different types of weapons and equipment that you can get and artifacts that you could get, all really, I mean, it was based on the sub-weapon idea, but still the scope of what you could do in just this 4 to 5 hour game is ridiculous, and the scope of what you can find in this castle, or spoilers from here on to the end of the video just in case. So spoiler warning, I'm not in trouble. Okay. 2 castles. So, there are 2 castles. This game threw in a second castle. We'll get to that, but hey, it was what it was. So, it did a lot of amazing things, and I don't know if it's perfect per se, and it's not. No game is perfect, but to me, I like Castlevania Symphony of the Night the best out of all of them. I would say maybe Dawn of Sorrow would be the next best one, even though Dawn of Sorrow did that whole like stylus barrier boss fight thing that was really ridiculous. I mean, as a game without that, it was fine. But still, I'm partial to the Metroidvania style, so that will inform where I go to from this. I mentioned before the original and the PSP remakes. We'll get over that as well. And I also want to mention that because Rondo of Blood came first, I don't know as much about it, but really all you need to know is Richter and Maria as characters. they were involved in the original game. Richter being the hero of the tale, and Richter's a nice enough guy, and unlike the interpretation of Trevor from the animated show, which kind of made him kind of a curmudgeon, like a annoying guy, I think the PS2 game made him a little bit more simplistic, but a lot more determined. Richter always came across as, I'm doing this because I'm good. I'm doing this because I need to, because my family bloodline said so. The typical Belmont guy. And so you have him going through everything and saving people in whether you do the Dracula X one or the Rondo of Blood version. I think they're the same game, just done differently on different systems. I don't remember it offhand. I know Rondo of Blood is considered the more correct or better interpretation of it. And it does have like voice acting and stuff, which made it, even more awesome. But that's where Maria comes from as well, because Richter saves Maria in those events. And then a couple years go by, I believe 5 years go by, and that translates into Symphony of the Night. So Richter's here, Maria's here, obviously Alucard is here. Of course he is, because he's the guy you're controlling for one version of the game. Alucard was in Castlevania 3, but this is what everybody remembers. And anytime any game brings him back, I know some of the DS games brought him back as a special character. The animated show made a big push as him as one of the characters, and they did him justice. I'm not saying otherwise. You have a lot to thank Symphony of the Night for and Rondo of Blood for. So Richter and Maria from one game, Alucard from another, smashed together into a Castlevania that transformed the entire genre and kind of made its own game. Another thing that the animated show was able to touch on was the relationship between Alucard, Dracula, and Dracula's wife and Alucard's mother, Lisa. They gave her like a substantial 10-minute opening sequence, right? In the first episode, they got together, and that, she was burned at the stake, and Alucard or Dracula just went and murdered everybody, as you do. So yes, that sequence is actually played for and was started in Symphony of the Night, and they expanded on it at points in the rest of the 4 seasons run. They're going to change it up for season 5 and then focus on the Richter Maria thing more. I would bet you Alucard has to be involved. There's no way he's not involved, because they went from Castlevania 3 to Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. They have a lot they can do with this franchise. So all of the pieces are in place, and all of the characters are in place. And speaking of the characters, we start with Alucard. And he was voiced by Robert Belgrade in the original, and in the remake, Yuri Lowenthal. And I think what I will do about the voice acting situation is kind of give you my thoughts as to who did it better as I go, as I introduce them. And this one is a no contest. I find that Castlevania is known more for the lines that they did. The, what is a man? The miserable little pile of secrets, and that thing. But at the same time, you have lines like, Darkling, I smell your blood. You are a vampire. It's goofy shit. This was back when there was no super quality control, so you had stuff like Metal Gear Solid, it was really good. Grandia 2, pretty damn good. But then you'd have stuff like this where it would depend on the character. So my stance on the voice acting is it really depends on the character, who they were acted by, and how they were delivering it. So my overall thoughts on the original, it's case-by-case basis of whether the actor did a good job. Did they do the lines very well? It's kind of icky. It's kind of gooey. It's the early dub era of anime type thing where you never know what you're getting. The PSP remake, better they had more seasoned talent and they had more time to do it, though the the actors they chose, it's fine. They could have chosen somebody else to play Alucard. They chose Yuri Lowenthal. Fair. I mean, he's a good actor in almost everything else. He's not the fit for Alucard character. Alucard to me feels like a 35, 45-year-old vampire who looks like he's 25. So it's like a James Bond thing. Would you ever cast a young James Bond? I don't want to get into that sort of situation, but you can see my point. Alucard should sound very stiff. It's like the anime. They chose Crispin Freeman to do him in the anime. It's a different Alucard, but that's what I expect the son of Dracula to sound like. I expect him to sound very pissed off. I expect him to sound like Robert Belgrade sounded. Very stiff, very morose, very just in your face. But he had some snarky lines, which was nice. Alucard is Dracula's son. Imagine that. 'Cause it's spelled backwards. Whatever. Anyway. He's awesome. He can use any weapon. He can transform into a wolf. He can transform into mist. He can transform into a bat. He can pretty much do anything. And it's almost unfair how powerful he gets to be. And it makes sense. He is the son of Dracula, for Christ's sake. It would make sense that he'd be almost 9-killable. And, they pull that off in the animated show very well, because it's just a blast to play as him. In the early platformer games, you had this real stiff vibe because you had to program death pits and enemies and things. It always felt like, whether you were playing Simon or Trevor or whomever, it always felt like they were just stiff. They would jump weird, or they'd backstep weird, or whatever. In Symphony of the Night, Alucard moves very swift, very fast. His backdash is the stuff of legend. And, when he gets hit, he goes, what? That sort of thing. And it's just a joy. And playing as him is so much fun. You have Dracula. And I do have a list of voice actors from the original, because these are ones I don't remember offhand. I remember the ones from the PSP. But Michael Gwynn was the original voice actor for Dracula. And I will say he did a very good job. Of the people who they got voice acting for, he's the one everybody remembers, because of the miserable little pile of secrets that I have at you. I do think his line at the end of this, where he quotes scripture, is a bit odd, so they changed it in the remake to not even do that. But he owns the scenery, as he should. He's Dracula. They have Patrick Sates play him in the remake, and Patrick Sates is Dogi from Ys, and he's been in loads of every other video game or anime you can think in 20 years for any company, and you would know his voice anywhere. So funny enough, speaking of vampires, he was actually Luke Valentine in the anime, so one of the main guys that Alucard in the anime has to fight. So again, there's this weird crossover. How do I know that? I watch too much shit. Anyway, Patrick Sates, again, does a good job. I'm not going to say it's a wash. I mean, you can say it's nostalgia kicking in. I think Gwyn does a really good job, and as I've said, he's probably the best voice actor of the 5 or 6 that they get in the game. And he damn well should. His opening fight with Richter as Dracula is great, and the lines he gets are great, and Dracula does an accounting of himself. I always wonder, because they always change how he looks. They always change how Dracula looks. He either has the old school black and red, or even the purple on occasion, but then he has slick black hair, like in the movies, like the Bela Lugosi thing, or in their most often they'll do the pale skin, pale hair, and pure black and red trench. And that's the look that I'm associating with Dracula. The animated show did kind of both, where they had him in black hair, but less pale skin, but the red trench coat looking thing. Either way is fine. I think the white hair, white skin look is what I associate with Dracula, and, I believe it started here. Or it began in the first game, but it was really fleshed out in stuff like Rondo of Blood and this game, for sure. Richter is Richter Belmont. You can actually play as him if you put the code Richter in a second playthrough. Makes it more like a traditional Castlevania game. It's like Rondo of Blood. So he was voiced by Ramsey Scott in the original, and I believe they said David Vincent in the PSP remake. And really, it's kind of a wash. What's the line everybody remembers for the Ramsey version? It's the "Die, monster! You don't belong in this world." And it's fine. He gets the mid Coliseum part, and he gets to be the evil guy for half a second. Both versions are fine. Richter is a Belmont. Like, there's nothing super fancy or super complicated. He's got a whip. He kicks your ass. He's got the Hydra Storm thing, which is the best move. Don't say, like, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's the cross. No, it's the Hydra Storm. It is always the Hydra Storm. That's the best. But he gets to do the crazy thing where if you dash, you could do like this dashing drop kick thing where he drop kicks in the air. It's this crazy. Like, how do you physically like do that? You slide and then you go up in the air. How does that work? I don't get it. So it makes no sense. But he's a Belmont, so I'm willing to just let it go. So Richter comes back 5 years later and ends up being possessed and leads the castle. That's why Alucard is the main character this time, because Richter is here who owns the thing. He is being possessed by one of Dracula's henchmen. He's known as Shaft, and he's weird, bony-looking magician, voodoo priest-looking guy. And it's fine. That guy gets his ass kicked. He doesn't really leave. He's more of a minor character. So I'm focusing more on the main 4 characters. You've got Richter, and early on in Rondo of Blood, he saves Maria. Maria Renard, voiced, let's see, Kimberly Forsyth. Okay, that's the last one. I was using IMDb as a reference, so sue me. But Kimberly Forsyth in the original, and Michelle Ruff in the PSP version. Again, I know the PSP actors way more, so I know, like, I'm gonna side with them more often. But it's a weird thing where I think I like Ruff as an actor more. I don't know if I like her interpretation more, because Forsyth is more of the, like, really, like, deeper voiced female, and Michelle can do that too, but she didn't choose to do that. She went for more of the Valley Girl character, the younger teenager, the Yukari Takeba in Persona 3 kind of voice. And I was like, it's a bit of a disconnect, because everybody else, like Alucard and Maria, sound way younger than they should. Maria sounds right, but it is a disconnect. At least with Alucard, you're just like, they just miscast it. Or Yuri was told to, do his normal voice, and it just didn't feel right. Again, I'm not claiming that's what happened. I'm not claiming that the actor is at fault. I'm just stating an opinion on it. Michelle Ruff is amazing as an actor, and you see that when I'm gushing over her at any point when she's playing characters in Catherine and Persona and all that shit. And it's like, I've heard her for 20 years. I know what she's capable of. I think her interpretation is nice, and it's fine. But again, it's a disconnect from, like, a 30-year-old sounding lady who, is technically like 16 to 18. So, deep voiced female. Okay, whatever. I can buy that. I don't think Forsyth was acted as well, and this is a trend. I don't think the original voice acting outside of maybe Death and Dracula are voiced better than the characters in the PSP version. I think there's better acting in the PSP version, but there's less chance of failure. So, better actors, but it's less impactful. Castlevania is all across the board, and it's like, you've got your really good And then you've got the succubus interpretation, like, what happened? Like, some of the lines were just, what? You know? So again, I'm not saying the voice acting is perfect in either version. I prefer the PSP version just because it's just easier to listen to. And, well, I'm biased because anime. But again, I think a lot of people have a fondness for the 97 version, as they probably should. That's the one they play more than often. You have to, like, look for the PSP version on some channels that are way smaller, or you have to actually physically play a different game to unlock the PSP version. I think they put the PSP version on the PS4 now. I'm not sure. I think they still have the original. But again, whichever version you prefer, there's no wrong choice. All I'm saying is that there's acting differences in both, and there's line differences in both, and they changed it around. And the PSP version is smoother, and there's less room for error because you have actors that, I'm familiar with. I will respond to them more nicely as their characters. But again, they're not perfect. But I wanted to get that out of the way because I know I always bring that up when I'm in a Twitch conversation or a Twitch stream or whatever, and people look at me like I'm a crazy person. So I'm willing to just bank on, hey, I like the acting to be smooth and not be the weird B-movie, like, 90s era weirdness, that stuff that people keep bringing up, like Tidus's laughing scene is awful. It's not, by the way. That sort of thing, where people, like, judge a thing based on their acting. Castlevania kind of skirts by because of some of the lines that are so iconic, but you look at it now and you're just like, it's not perfect, but that's me. I'm sorry I took a lot of time on it, but I did want to get that out there because that was one of my main kind of criticisms, but I did want to at least put him in an equal light because the PSP version is not perfect either. Let's switch tack here. We talked about the characters, and let's talk about the battle system because it's totally different. No more death pits, no more whips, no more, just straight sub weapons. You have your sub weapons, but they're tiered to hearts. But your main weapon can be swords. They can be fists. They can be nunchucks. They can be smaller swords. They can be so many different things. They programmed so many different weapons into this thing. They didn't even put some of the ones that were in the Japanese version in here. There was, like, flame-based swords. There was this weird sword that, like, floats in the air in front of you, and it would go weep, weep, weep. It would just make this weird weep noise as it went through the air and cut the enemy in half. I don't think that's in the code for the English version. Like, so again, this is another Japanese version thing that a lot of people on, like, the speedrunning scene do, the randomizer scene. They get stuff like Vorpal blades or that crazy Weep sword and, other things. They get a duplicator and the power of Sire. You can just basically chuck something into the air, and via the power of Dracula, everything dies. Stuff like that. I mean, you get the power of Sire too, but you only get like one or two. But those were some things that were left out of the original, whether because they were too powerful or, in the case of a giant fuck off sword that floats like a foot from you. You don't even have to hold the thing. You have basically endless range on the thing as long as you hit the arc right. So weapons are great. You get different shields, and different shields have you pull the shield in front of you, Captain America style, and it has these different insignias. It could be a Medusa head. It could be the Alucard crest. It could be just standard shields, like leather fuck off shield that does nothing, but you get to use that. You can use maces as weapons, and one of them is like super powerful, the shield rod. You take the late game Alucard shield and the shield rod, and you have, hey, I'm going to wreck face, and you basically can't die. You hold the shield out, and everything takes like hundreds of damage, and you heal for everything, and you're invincible. So that's the method I use. The harder method is the Chrysagrim or there's this area with these Tin Man looking things with like axes. They look like vacuum cleaners with axes in them. But there's also these other enemies that are floating around, these like ghost looking things. But every so often they'll drop a weapon. And that weapon is the Crusagram, and it's the Vorpal Blade, but better. And all you have to do is hold the button, or even just, couple weapons, and it's just 8 blades, just, and the enemies are dead. So either method is pretty much, game is over. No threat whatsoever. And I think that's what I will say about one of my other criticisms is when you get to the second castle, if you level up enough, it really does take the difficulty down quite a bit. They had so much HP and so many other health bonuses, it's almost like you're destined not to fail. Barring like a couple of enemies in the mid points or one of the bosses or even the super boss in the upper cemetery catacomb area, the Galamoth fight, there's no real way to lose. And if you use one of those cheese methods, well, yeah, game's over. You can kill Dracula in 5 seconds. So if you're looking for a challenging version, you can get like a hard type mod on a PC version or port or something. But the original is a hard-ish first or second area, but then after a while it gets kind of easy. And then outside of 2 or 3 different enemies in the inverted castle, it's just this downward slope into, it's not all that difficult. It's not that hard. So where does this game get so right that basically a mindless slugfest that is in your favor, that is tilted in your favor, how does it keep engaging you? And it engages you because you're always finding new weapons, new artifacts. You go here and you can get a holy symbol, which is totally a snorkel. You use the snorkel of God, basically, and you can breathe underwater without taking damage. You find a cube that opens up these blue doors. You open up the second castle, pretty much. You have to find these glasses and rings that you got to find this ring that will open up where Maria's at, and then you have to do a boss fight to get one of them. Then you have to get something from way down in the bottom of the thing, go all the way to the top left, go through like 3 or 4 rigmarole thing with a bunch of spikes and a gated door. Somehow Maria's both there and then in another I don't know. It's like she can teleport or something, but basically she's there in most places to give you the thing that can get you to the second castle. And then after that, you just look. But in that first castle, you're just looking. There is a preferred way to go, levels-wise, but you can go wherever you want to go. You can beat the game without even doing the second castle if you want to. It's the bad ending, because Richter dies, but it's like, hey, you can do it. You can even do this whole crazy thing where you could get this super good ending where Maria goes after Alucard, but you have to get like 200% completion. So you have to hit every nook and cranny of the castles, plural. And I think I've done it once, and I never want to do it again. It is ridiculous. But there's so many cool things you can do. You can even summon familiars. You can summon a demon that pushes a button, because that's all he does. You can summon a ghost that can fly into an enemy and just go, or you can use a sword that will just spin in the air. The problem is he doesn't control it. You can just go in one direction and just fly. He doesn't want to go in a direction. I think the best one is the bat or the ghost, because they go in the general vicinity of enemies most of the time. You can also get a couple of fairies which do some healing items for status effects. There's so much stuff in here. It's just amazing how much stuff they were able to cram into one actiony, platformy game that became a Metroidvania. And the bosses are cool. Some are iconic, like Dracula and Death and Succubus. I mean, Succubus mostly because she's not wearing any underwear, but, that's beside the point. Anyway, so, yeah, look forward to that one. Anyway, but, yeah, you have Dracula, Death, Succubus, you've got this floating, rotting carcass that just shoots out bugs at you. I think he's Beelzebub, Beelzebub, that one. He's one of the harder ones. You've got this like weird creature that has this giant freaking mallet. He just spins around the room. You got your bats. You got a doppelganger, like all manner of thing. All manner of bosses. Some are easier than others, like the mummy who just kind of walks towards you, and if he punches you, or if he grabs you, he'll just spin you around and throw you against the wall. I think the best one, though, yet most annoying one, is Legion. And Legion is the one that shows up in everything, for better or for worse. It is a giant floating ball of dead bodies. And it doesn't do damage with the dead bodies, but if you open it up enough, well, several of the carcasses will fly out, and then a laser beam, this tentacle with a laser beam will shoot at you. That'll do some damage. So you got to blow it open, and then you've got to hit the middle core, and usually it's with like the knives if you're weak, or you use the axe. The axe has the parabola arc, so you can actually hit it from anywhere. So Legion is memorable. The hardest one, and the one I hate fighting, is Galamoth. That phone distracted me. Anyway, we're doing this live. I don't care. So Galamoth is the super, super, super duper hard boss, which sucks balls. He was a reference to something, I think it was Kid Dracula. I don't think it was affiliated with the Castlevania series, but they got him as the super cameo boss to kill you if you didn't even think Dracula was hard enough. And Dracula is a pain in the ass if you don't, use the cheap shit that I was using, the Chris Grimm method. Galamoth takes forever to kill. I watched a speed run of it, and the guy took like 4 or 5 tries to kill Galamoth and kept using all of his potions just because he's had so much freaking health. So be forewarned, if you're still looking for a challenge and you're not going to use the cheat methods, there's still a couple of bosses that will wreck your face. The last thing I'm going to talk about before getting to the end here is the music and the visual design, because normally I'm not super worried about like visual design of a game so much, but the way that they used 2D sprites with PS1 hardware, they were able to do a lot of fun, unique, like shadow effects and rain effects. They even have the outer wall where you see a bunch of like the outer wall, or the chapel where you see a bunch of like Mode 7 clouds roll by, or these rainstorms. And these were things that happened in the Super NES, sure. But the effects that they were able to achieve, and the grandiosity of all of the backgrounds, were really spectacular. A lot of it is procedurally generated and reused because they're going room for room, sure, but they got these amazing tapestries in some areas. They've got like the Colosseum, where there's a bunch of freaking like graves and dead bodies and dinner tables and blood smears and all manner of things, but they have the full-on Colosseum arena in view in this darkened room. So they're able to put dark rooms in there, but they're also get the light. There's so many cool things to do with the visual design and fidelity of this game, and it's enhanced by the music. And the composer for this and many other games from Igarashi, including Bloodstained, Michiru Yamane. And this is what she's known for. She was just fantastic. The redub of Dance of Illusions, the Alucard, or the Dracula and Richter fight, is my favorite version of that theme. And I think you get that in Dracula X or Super Castlevania 4. I forget which one does that, but this one is even more intense. A lot of big drum beats and cool stuff. There's Dracula's Castle, which is probably one of the best Dracula's Castle themes, and this is going in line with Vampire Killer and Beginning and Theme of Simon, which are also amazing. And in this one, I'm still just like, there's a breakdown part in the middle where the piano keys come back, and then it's like beginning of the song again to a crescendo, and it's just like yes. So it's very heavy music too. You've got Requiem of the Gods, which is the chapel theme, which just gives you this awesome chorus effect. Again, enhanced music because they went from the SNES era to the PS1. So there's just so much more going on with the music and sound design. So the chapel's good. The Wandering Ghosts and Colosseum is this crazy funk beat of this like battle arena thing, but it's a funky beat. It's cool. My personal favorite song is The Tragic Prince, and that is the one you get in the clock tower. It starts off slow for a little bit, for like 5 or 10 seconds, and then it just goes into this awesome, like, heavy drum beat and guitar. And it's a bit of a compressed guitar sound, but even for the time, I was just, this song is amazing. It's got these crazy keyboards on the choruses that are just amazing too. So it's this heavy ass metal stuff that I appreciate more than anything because I'm a metalhead. But then you add in all the keyboards and it's just like, yes, this song is great. I just wish the design of the clock tower didn't suck because of the Medusa heads, but that's besides the point. I mean, if you stay longer, you get to hear the song more, but so whatever. So the Inverted Castle, they have some good songs too. Lost Painting, which is more of the library and the underground areas. You've got Finale Toccata, Toccata. The problem with that, and this is one of my other drawbacks, is those themes tend to drown out everything else. There's a lot of themes in the original castle. When you get to the Inverted Castle, a lot of the places share 1 to 2 themes. So it does wear thin after a while. As good a songs as they are, it's still a bit, can't win them all. Like I said, this game's not perfect, so bear that in mind if you ever played the Inverted Castle. The last song is the Festival of Servants. This is the boss theme. This is the main boss theme. There's some other ones, and there's the final boss theme. This one is cool because, again, metal. Heavy, like double bass. And it's just frantic. It's got some keyboards in it, but it's just this crazy guitar riff. And the guitar is very distinct in this game. It's like fairly reminiscent of like guitars in Final Fantasy VI, where it's a highly compressed sound, but for some reason it's still very heavy sounding. It's almost like the 80s, like into the 90s kind of sound, but it's compressed to fit in the video game file. I'm shocked they were able to make these songs as good as they were and sound as good as they were. And I know this was right as MIDI was starting to take a backseat to more orchestral and actual instrumentation. I don't know if like Pro Tools and things were a thing back then, but again, this was 97. You go from the same year, Final Fantasy VII's using a MIDI, admittedly still good music, but Castlevania using a bit more orchestral versions, and then a couple years later Final Fantasy VIII would be using full-on orchestra, and it would almost be like unrecognizable and unfair, right? So just that difference, it adds a lot. And again, the Castlevania themes are going to be a lot more metal based, they're going to be a lot more gothic based, but this game has so much stuff going for it. I mentioned the voice acting. Is it perfect? No, but it adds to the characters. Again, these lines are often repeated. For better or for worse, they're memorable. The die monster, you don't belong in this world, the miserable little pile of secrets, those lines. I remember the Darkling line to my dismay all the time still. But they still add to the characters because you get a new vibe when you add voice acting. For better or for worse, it adds something to the effect, or it can detract. I don't think either version completely detracts. It adds to what they were going for. And that's why something like an animated show adds so much more to the Castlevania mythos, because you can expand more because you have a storytelling narrative device, this voice acting that you can add to it. So a lot of the groundwork was laid here. The music, again, is amazing. You have Alucard, who's one of the best characters in the franchise, if not the fan favorite. You've got Richter and Maria, who service themselves well, considering that they were in a game before this. even in sort of like cameo-ish parts. The story, for what it is what you need it to be. Son of Dracula kicks the shit out of Dracula because he has to. Dracula himself is amazing and maybe the best version of it, other than maybe Curse of Darkness. If you ever played Curse of Darkness, that Dracula is impressive, but he's based on this Dracula. Again, you get this, you see where I'm going with a lot of this. Everything was built upon it from the platformer origins, but morphed into this amazing new genre that hooked me, as it probably hooked a lot of people into. I love this style of Castlevania more than I do the platformers. There's nothing wrong with liking the platformer stuff if you're more of the retro style, but for me, this is what Castlevania is. This is what it ended up becoming. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. The best part is we have both of them. We have Bloodstained Ritual of the Night for fans like me of the RPG style. You have Curse of the Moon, I believe it's Curse of the Moon for the retro platformer style. So you can do everything. And I think the franchise, whether it keeps on going or, if Konami decides to just run into posterity with re-releases and whatever, more people should experience what we experienced back then. Because, again, this is going back 25 years at this point. This game still holds up because we remember what it did for us. That sense that we played this the first time and didn't know where the hell to go and wondering what was around the corner. And I have only scratched the surface. There's only so much that a person can show you or tell you, and a stream can show you. You have to play this game to recognize just how good, even now, it holds up. It has some foibles, sure. It's a little too easy for a Castlevania game. The voice acting, again, is a little hit and miss. The themes get a little samey after a while, but those are quibbles. When you consider how much went into this game and how much you get out of it for this 4 to 5 hour experience, there is nothing to be ashamed of for playing this game. There is nothing but praise I could just heap on this entire game. But that'll do it for me today. Hopefully I gave you a good accounting of this game. I implore anyone, whether you're a fan of RPGs, Castlevania, action platformers, Metroids, whatever, any gamer could like this game. I guarantee it. Show them to Twitter, Twitch, YouTube friends. Get them to play it. This game is amazing, and it's one of my all-time favorites. So as far as the next month goes, we have Heat Guy J next week. It'll be a lesser-known anime that I remembered from MTV2, of all things. That's how I first saw it, and I rewatched it a couple months back, and it still holds up as an early 2000s crime show. The week after that will be Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Gotcha, catch 'em all. And oh boy, do I have a lot to talk about. I played the game earlier this year for the first time, and oh god, did it take forever. But in a good way. But also in a frustrating way. But it's a gotcha game, so what can you do? After that, we'll spend a couple weeks on Cowboy Bebop. So I will rewatch Cowboy Bebop in the month prior, because we're in that phase where the live action show is going to come out November 19th. So what I want to do is do a review podcast on the original Cowboy Bebop, which should be easy. It's my favorite show of anime history, so it's the only anime I ever gave a perfect 10 to. So if you thought I was gushing a little too much over this, then Cowboy Bebop is going to be like, what the fuck, dude? So I will have a lot of hype surrounding this Cowboy Bebop thing, for better or for worse. I am cautiously optimistic as somebody who is staying far away from the, let's watch some trailers and watch some footage and listen to the actors and all the, gloss. I want to watch the live action as it happens, because I don't know what they're going to do translating a Japanese game or a Japanese anime into a live action Guardians of the Galaxy Mandalorian thing. And that might not be even what they're going for. You might be snickering at me going, that's not what they're doing. And I'm like, I'll find out. And I'm reviewing them both. I'll review the anime and then the live action. And that will take me an entire month to do, week on, week out. So next week is Heat Guy J. We'll see you next time. Citizen Strife signing off.